All right, what's going on, everybody? Today we're here on UI Design Daily, which is an awesome free UI UX resource for web developers and graphic designers. Now they have a ton of resources just like this sign-up form to go ahead and browse through. So I will leave the link down below in the description. Definitely recommend going ahead and checking it out. So today we're going to be taking this sign-up form here that we have mocked up that I found on the site that I thought would be a cool one to go ahead and do. And we're going to be converting this mock-up into some HTML, and we will end up with something just like this. Now, the major difference between the mock-up and the actual HTML version I created here is we have this skewed effect at the bottom, which is done using CSS, which is actually very simple to do. So I'll show you how to do this. And some other notable things here we did is a CSS inset, or I think it's like a scale to make the button look like it's being pressed in when you hover over it. And then also on the focus state here of each of these inputs, we have a CSS transition, a border color change, and also a box shadow, which I'll show you how to do as well. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is basic CSS and HTML form inputs and such like that. And we also have a hover effect here on the sign up buttons down here for each social media. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So using VS Code for my text editor here, we have an HTML file and a CSS file. And some notable plugins I'm using for this video will be Prettier, which is going to be our code formatter, which upon save will automatically format our code for us. I'm also using Live Server, which is what you're seeing right over here. It is basically a way whenever I make a change and I save it, it'll automatically refresh over here, so it makes seeing your work a whole lot easier. And then also one thing you're not seeing, I'm actually using a plugin called Emmet, which is a HTML and CSS shortcut, I think even for JavaScript too. So definitely recommend those three for doing any type of coding. It makes your life a whole lot easier. So to start off with here, let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to be using Emmet. So how to get our basic boilerplate with Emmet and make our life a lot easier is we do exclamation point and tab, and then it automatically generates that for us. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change the title to sign up. And if I save this here, I think the first refresh we have to do, you'll see that it'll say sign up on the top here now. But now if I make it say sign up test, you should see it automatically refresh up here. So that's why I love this plugin, because I can just save it and I see my changes happen right away. So let's go ahead and save that back to what we had it. Now, a few things you want to do is, number one, we want to import that style sheet we have. So let's actually switch this back over here, and I'm going to close that to save. You know, I actually kind of like it. It centers the code a little bit more to the left. So we want to import our style sheet here. So we're going to do this, and we'll do that. And then we also need to get a few other things. So number one, we're going to be using Font Awesome. So we need to get that library imported here. The easiest way to do that would be to go to this website right here, cdnjs.com, and just search up Font Awesome. It should be the top one here at the top of the results, and we can just copy the entire link tag and go back over here to our code, control paste that in, save it, and it auto formats because we're using Prettier, which just make things a lot easier. You can see how clean this actually looks now instead of it being one full line. And the last thing we want to do is, since we're going to be using Google Font for our font family, we want to go ahead and get that. So you can head over to Google Fonts if you've ever used it before. You can actually just import it right into your project as you would Font Awesome. And we're using every single style here, so I have those all selected, and then we just take this link tag here and we do the same thing as we did with our Font Awesome sheet. So that is all the importing we'll need to do. So let's go ahead and get into the code here. So as we can see, the final project, it's not really too complex. So what we have going on here is the body is our main wrapper. So the body tag we're going to be using as our main wrapper, which is going to result in us using a little bit less HTML. And then we have a couple sections here. So we have the whole sign up form wrapped in a form wrap, and then we have two sections within that sign up form. So we have the top section and the bottom section. So let's go ahead and write this HTML up. It's actually very simple. So like I said, the body is going to be our main wrapper. And if you want to do a div with a class of sign up, I can type sign up wrap, and this is where Emmet comes in handy. You can do div dot in the class and it auto generates a class for you. So it just saves time when you're doing a lot of your coding. And then inside this wrap, we want to do two different divs, one for the sign up top. So we're going to do div dot sign up top, And then we also want to do a div of sign up bottom for that bottom section here. So sign up bottom. And that is going to be the majority of the HTML from the outer looks of it. Now we have to actually do the inner, but this is going to be our basic structure for the entire form. So let's start with doing the inner HTML for the sign up top. So a few things you want to do here is we want to have a title. So we're going to do an H2. So we're going to do sign up. And then we also want to do the form itself. So we're going to do a form element. We can just do the Emmet abbreviation and hit enter, and it's going to also generate that for us. Now, since we are not actually having this go anywhere or do anything, this is just going to be HTML and CSS, we can get rid of that form action. Now, we're going to want to do a few input elements here. So what I like to do when I do forms, I like to actually wrap each input in a div itself. So we're going to do a div with the class of inputs, input wrap, and inside that we're going to have an inputs type of text, and we want this one to be a placeholder of username. Now, if I save this change, you can see nothing's here, but when I save this, it's automatically, gonna generate that stuff for us without us refreshing. So that's why I love this live server plugin, because like I said, it makes seeing your work a whole lot easier. So this is going to be the basic structure for all of our input elements. So let's go ahead and duplicate this or copy it 3 times, because we're going to have one for email and also have one for passwords. So let's go over here and change this to email. And before I do it, let's capitalize this first word. It's going to drive me nuts. And then we're going to do password here, and we're going to do type of password. And we save that, you'll see we have all 3 of those here. Now, the next thing we want to do, if I come over here, so we have these 3. We want to get the accept the agreement of terms and conditions, and then also the submit button. So this is why, number 1, I'm putting these in an input wrap, is because we're going to want to display these side by side, and by default, everything is going to be stacked like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually duplicate the input wrap here, and we're going to paste this down. We're going to get rid of the placeholder, because we don't need a placeholder for the checkbox. We're going to replace this with a checkbox type, and then we want to get a p tag over here, and we want to put accept the, and because we're going to be targeting this text a different color, the easiest way to do that is with a span tag. So we're going to do a span, and it automatically does that for us with Emmet, and then we want terms and conditions. Perfect. So the reason why I said we're doing this is because by default, you'll see these are stacked. So when we set the input wrap in the CSS later to flex, that'll automatically go side by side, which will give the look we're looking for right over here. Okay, now let's make this a little bit bigger. Now, next you want to do the actual submit button, which is going to have the same type of format as this. So I'm just going to copy this, paste this in, and we want to get rid of the input type. We're going to actually want a button here, and we're going to do type of submit, and we're going to put submit in here. And then for this, we want to put already have an account, so already have an account, and then we want to put in the span here log in. I think it's 2 words. Okay, so that is actually all the HTML for the top portion of it. Let's go ahead and get to the bottom portion over here. So inside this, we're going to do an H3, so something a little bit smaller, and we're going to do or sign up with, and I'll put a space there. And then we want to do a link container, because we're going to want to have something to contain all the links, and so we're going to do div.link container. Inside this container, we're going to do a UL, and to save some time here, I'm going to copy in the HTML for the icons, just to save some time. So we have a Facebook icon, a Twitter icon, and a Google Plus icon. If I save that, you can see things are looking a little bit not even close to this, but now we have to get into the CSS. So this is a basic structure for the HTML for the whole form. So let's go ahead and just open to the side here, and we're going to go ahead and just shrink this a little bit. The reason I like to do this is because I can see the classes a little bit easier that I'm targeting. So let's start with the CSS. Now, from the start, you can see a lot of stuff has some default padding and margin and stuff like that. So what I like to do for every project is a simple reset. and we're going to do a padding to 0. We're going to set margin to 0, and we're going to set box sizing to border box. Now if I save this, you'll see everything is going to get scrunched up, and it gets rid of all of that default padding and margin that comes by default to a lot of p tags, span tags, and all the above. So that's going to clear that out for us. Now, like I mentioned in the start, we're going to use the body for our wrapper. So a few things I want to do is set a few things up here. So for the font family, we're using our Google font. So what we can do, I'm going to paste it in here. So we're going to use font family quicksand, and if that's not available, it's going to default to sans serif. And by default, we're going to use everything for 400 font default weight type. And if I save that, you'll see the font will take effect. And then for the body, like I mentioned, we want to set this to its container so that everything inside of it, no matter the height, will be pushed in the center. And how we do that is we can set the height of this to 100 VH. We can set the display to flex because we're going to push everything into the center vertically and horizontally. And then we want to do justify content center, and then align items center. And if we do that, it'll push it right down here into the middle. And then we have to do the background, which I'm going to copy in here because it's going to save some time, and I'll explain it. And paste that in here. So let's just push this over a little bit, and this is probably be a good time to close this. Okay. So what we have going on here is a background linear gradient to bottom right. So it's going to start at the top and go down to the bottom. If I save this, you'll see that happen. And we have that really cool gradient that we had on the finished project. So now that that's complete, we want to start to target the actual sign up form itself. And we're going to go sign up wrap here. And we're going to want to display this as a width of 500 pixels fixed. And I'm going to copy in the box shadow here because, once again, it's a little bit of extra code that's going to save some time if I just paste it in here. So we're using a box shadow of 20 pixels, 25, -5, and you can see it's kind of a little bit of a complex box shadow. I actually got this off Tailwinds, and then if I save this, you'll see that it'll start to have that shadow on the bottom. And we want to change the background color to white, so FFF, and then it'll give it that look that we're going for. Now we want to target, that is it for the sign up wrap. So now we're going to target the sign up top, which is just going to be all of this right here. So we'll do sign up apostrophe top, and we're going to give this a padding of 40 pixels on the top, 40 pixels on the left and right, and then 20 pixels on the bottom. And what that's going to do is going to push everything 20 pixels this way, 20 pixels this way, and 40 to the top, and then give it a 20 padding on the bottom. And we're going to want to set this to position relative. Normally you don't have to do this, but we're going to be adding that skewed effect, and we're going to want to add it relative to this div right here. So that's why we're doing this. And we also want to set this display flex and then flex direction column. Perfect. So you're not going to see any change there with that. So let's move on to the actual inside of the form. So we're going to target the H2. Now, being there's only one H2 in this project, we can simply just target it by using its element right here. Normally, if you have more than one H2 in the project, you're going to want to class, target it by class name, or do sign up top H2 so it only targets the H2 within this div. But for the sake of this project, we don't need to do that. So we're going to want to do a text transformation here to uppercase. This is going to allow it to be fully uppercase without us having to change the HTML. And we want to do a font weight of a little bit heavier of 600. We want to text align it to the center so that it centers within the form. Put a margin bottom to separate it from the form itself by 32 pixels. And then change the color. I'm going to copy this in here. Let's go ahead and do color. Hexadecimal value 3A99D0. If we save that, it'll have this nice look. Is going to be pushed to the center, margin bottom 32, and we change that color. Okay. Now let's get to targeting these input wraps. So like I mentioned in the beginning here, the reason why we're doing this is because the last two we need to be side by side. Right now they're currently stacked, and with a simple display flex here, it's going to allow us to have that side by side we're looking for. Okay. And then we want to put align items center, because as you can see right now, these aren't really aligned. And if I put align item center on a flex item, it'll go ahead and push this to so that they're horizontally aligned, or is it vertically? I don't know, but it aligns them so that they they're more congruent. Okay, and then we also want to separate each of these inputs by a margin bottom of 32 pixels to keep it kind of consistent with what we did with the sign-up form. So if we do that, everything's going to be spaced out a little bit, and it's still not looking correct, and we'll get to that in a second. So let's go ahead and target the actual P elements in here. So the P elements are the font the text we have here for the accepted terms and conditions and already have an account. So we're going to go ahead and set this to a font size of 13 pixels. By default, it's 16, so we're going to make those a little bit smaller. We want to do a color. Let's head over here. We're going to do a color of 4E585F, which is going to be a nice gray color. And then that is it for this. Now we put some of the text in this paragraph in a span, as you can see right here, because we want to target that a little bit differently. So what we can do is target the span directly, and we want to add this to a color of what we did the sign-up form to, so which is going to be this 3A99D0. We want to change the font weight to something a little bit heavier than the default, so we're going to put that to 600. And when you hover over this, you want to do a cursor pointer. And what that means is when you hover over, you can see you have the regular mouse. Now you have this cursor pointer when you hover over this span itself. So that is going to be it for the span. Let's head over and start styling the input itself. So by default, we want the size to be 14 pixels for this, so it's going to make everything a little bit bigger. We want to do a font weight of a little heavier of 500. We want to do a padding on each input of 4 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. We want to set the width to take up 100% of the space available. Right now it's not, but if I add the padding 4 pixels, which has nothing to do with the width, and the width 100%, you'll see that it'll take up the entire width of the form that it's allowing. But now you can see this is a little bit off, so we'll fix that in just a moment. Now we want to set the border to none. We want to set the border bottom and the transition here, so I'm going to copy this in to save some time. And you'll see here we're doing a border bottom 2 pixel solid with a color of E4, F0, F6, and a transition of 500 milliseconds ease on all. And you'll see why we did that in just a moment when we put the focus effect on it. So things are starting to look a lot better here. Now let's target the input on its focus. Now the input on its focus means when I actually click on it, you can see right now when I click on it, it has this ugly outline. So we're going to get rid of that. So let's go ahead and do input focus. And we're going to want to put a outline of none. We want to do a box shadow, which I'm going to copy in here, and a border color. So just to save some time in the CSS, I'll explain it. So a box shadow of 0, 1 pixel, 0, 0, a color of 88D9FC, and the same thing for the border color. So now if we click on it, you'll see that it has this really smooth transition, which is what we added right here. And then it also has a nice box shadow. Now, one thing we can do to get rid of the auto search, like the auto fill feature here, is if we go back to our HTML, for some reason it does this on email inputs. You can change the type to search, and the only reason I like this is because when I'm styling things, I don't like to have the autofill come in. You can change it to search, save that, and it should get rid of that. So now you have a clean, more modern looking form that you can style and display. So we have added that, so things are starting to look a lot better. Now we still need to address this down here, which is what we're going to do right now. So how we can do that without adding any class is we can type in input, for example, and we want to put some brackets, and we're going to do type equals check box. There we go. So that is going to target all the inputs that have the type of checkbox. So we want to give this a width of 20 pixels and a height of 20 pixels. Now if we do this, it's going to snap it back into place, and it's starting to look a little bit better. But now you can see it's kind of scrunched over here. So what we're going to want to do is a margin right of 16 pixels to separate it a little bit from that box. Okay. Now you can see that when I hover over this, you can't really see it too well, but there is a little bit of an outline here, which is from the focus state. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to just copy, oops, hell, what's going on here? We're going to copy this to save some time, get rid of all this. And we're going to do the same thing we did for the input, and we're going to do this in focus. And we want to do, let's see, outline, none. We want to do box shadow, none. And we want to do a border color, border color, none. So now when we click on this, you're going to see that we don't have that weird looking line at the bottom. Okay. So now we need to get to styling this button because right now it doesn't look anything like this. So with some simple code here, I'm going to paste in and I'll explain it to save some time because it's a little bit more code than we've had in the previous elements. Let's go ahead and put this in here and I'll explain it. So what we have going on is we have it set to a cursor pointer, which is the same thing we did for the span. We're adding padding to the top and bottom of 15 pixels, and we're adding it 60 left and right. We're adding a nice border radius of 30 pixels to round it off, putting the font to a little bit of a heavier weight of 600. No border, color of white, background color of the same one we've been using, the 3A99D0, and we're separating it like we did from the checkbox here to push it away from this text, and also a transition so that when we do the hover effect, it is nice and smooth and it has a good transition. So if I save this, you'll see that it'll change and things are looking a lot better. So let's go ahead and do the hover effect, which I'm going to copy and paste in as well too, and I'll explain it. And this is where we added the, excuse me, the inset where it's going to make it look like it's being pressed in, okay? So if I save this, you'll see that when I hover over it now, oops, let's click on it, it makes it look inset. So we're barely doing anything. The default for this inset is 1. So a transform scale of 1, you're going to see no difference. But when we change it to 0.98, which is just a very, very small difference from the default, it gives it this really cool effect of it that it's being pressed in. So that is that. Now let's get to the bottom because we have the top all complete here. We need to fix up this bottom and then we're going to have to add the skewed effect in, okay? So let's head over here and let's head down and we're going to do sign up top, or we wanted to target the sign up bottom, okay? And we want to display this as flex because we want it to display as a row by default, but we don't want that. We want it to do flex direction of column so it's up and down. We want to align the items in the center of the page or of the element here, and then we want to do a background color of hexadecimal value 00B0F3, okay, and that's going to give it the color we're looking for. But we need to add some padding because right now it's not, it looks kind of odd. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some padding of 60 pixels to the top, 40 pixels left and right, and 40 pixels on the bottom, and things will start looking a lot more better there. And we're also going to want to give this a color so that everything inside of it is white, so we can do FFF, and that looks a lot better. So the H3 is a little big, so we want to target that and make it a little smaller to kind of go with the final product here. So we're going to do a font weight of 600 and a font size of 13 pixels. Much better. And then we want to do, head over here to the UL. So right now we need this to be displayed in a row. Right now it's in a column by default. So once again, we can display this to flex. And it's going to give it that row we're looking for. We want to do a margin top to separate it from the sign up form or the H3 of, let's see, we're going to do 16 pixels there. And we want to do a list style of none. And that's going to get rid of those little dots you're seeing, okay? Now, let's target the LIs individually, which is housing each icon. So if we come down here and do LI, we can do a margin right of 40 pixels. We're going to add the font size to 24 to bump it up a little bit. Right now they're a little bit too small. And like we've done a couple times already, we're going to set the cursor to a pointer. Now, it looks a little bit off because what's happening here is it's pushing it to the left because we have a margin right on this one. Now, what we can do is we can actually do a little trick here and do LI and do last child, which is going to target the Google one right here, which we don't want it to have a margin right on it. Do margin right and set that to 0, and now it'll be back to how we should have it. Perfect. We could also do a couple other things, but that's just the way I did it. Like, you know, for a lot of things in this project, there is other ways to probably do it a little bit better, and if you have any of those ideas or want to share them below, you're more than welcome to, but this is the way I did it, and you don't have to follow me directly. So last thing you want to do is you want to add the hover effect to the icon here, and how we're going to do that is we're going to target the eye. So we want to put that transition we've been using for most things here, transition 500 milliseconds ease all, and then on the hover, so we're going to do eye hover, and we're going to target on the hover state, and we're going to just copy and paste this in here. And perfect, there we go. And now when we hover over this, you can see that it looks how we had it before. So let's go ahead and just go over this way, or copy this one. We'll paste it over here to kind of see if it looks the same. And you can see, oh, no, we need to add the skewed effect. That is right, I almost forgot that. So right now, here's what it looks like without the skewed effect, which is what we have right now. And here's what we have with the skewed effect. So let's go ahead and head back over to our code. And we need to head over to, I like to do my CSS in order. So as I mentioned earlier, we added this, we put a property on the sign up top of position relative because we want to position the skewed effect relative to this section right here. So let me go ahead and actually just bring this code in and I'll explain it. So we're going to put it right below this. So we're using .signupTop dot before. So when I save this, I'll put the background color as red. So let me explain what we're doing here. So we're putting the content to an empty value. We don't want to have any content in here. We're setting a position absolute so that it's positioned absolutely to the sign up top, which is positioned to relative, okay? So we're having it be a height of 50 pixels. We're setting it to be a bottom of -20. So bottom -20 means it's going to sit at the bottom here and then go outside of the container that it's in by 20 pixels. And we're doing left 0, right 0. And here's the property that actually, so let me just copy or comment this out and save it so you can see what it looks like without it. So by default, when we do this without the skewed effect, you have this desired effect right here, which is not what we're looking for. But when we add the transform property in here of skew on the y-axis of -3 degrees, we're going to get that up and down value or up and down appearance we had on the final product. And if I change this back to FFF, you can see now we have that skewed effect. So this is why we added a little bit more padding to the top of this one right here than we did here. So this one we put 40 and this one we did 60. So let's head over to here and now take a look at it. So things are looking pretty good and it's pretty identical to what we built over here. So that is going to do it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you guys did, make sure to leave a like down below. And if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and I will see you guys in the next one.